What's up guys? So you're thinking about taking the plunge into full-time private practice. Well, I know from experience that can feel like a giant question mark as far as how much that's going to cost you. In this video, I'm going to break down the startup costs of full-time private practice. Welcome to Private Practice Skills. I'm Dr. Marie Fang, psychologist in private practice. I post videos offering tools I learned the hard way about starting and growing private practice so that you don't have to. This is part 2 of a 3-part series on the cost of private practice. If you haven't seen the first video in this series on the cost of starting a part-time private practice, be sure to go back and watch that video first. There's a lot of costs that apply to part-time private practice that also apply here in full-time private practice, so I'm not going to go into as much detail here on the things that overlap. So be sure to watch that one first. So today we're just talking about the initial expenses of starting a full-time private practice. Personally, I'm a frugal gal, but also I live in a really expensive corner of the United States. So I'll break it down the way that I did it, but keep in mind that the costs are going to vary quite a bit based on where you live and your preferences. Now, the first and probably most obvious expense is that you're going to need a full-time office space. Now, obviously, as I said, prices can vary widely depending on where you live, so go ahead and do some research on Craigslist just to see how much offices are going for in your area. Also, keep in mind that security deposit is still a thing in commercial office space, and most landlords do also require a security deposit from you. The second most obvious expense once you're going into full-time private practice is that you're going to have to put furniture inside of that office. Now, furniture can get really pricey, and especially if you're really into certain brands or designs, this could get incredibly costly, even tens of thousands of dollars on furniture. Personally, I bought my furniture through Wayfair.com, which is kind of IKEA style, delivers to your home. So you can always add additional pieces of furniture later, but be sure to have your key anchoring pieces of furniture in place first because you don't want your office to feel empty and cold. The third expense for full-time private practice is the design elements. Design elements are super important. These are things like rugs, wall decor, pillows, blankets, plants. These are the items that make your space go from office to homey. I have a whole video dedicated to how to design your office space, so feel free to go ahead and check that out up here or in the description box. Expense number 4, liability insurance. I've seen costs for liability insurance range quite a bit from as low as $400 a year, upwards of $1,000 a year and beyond, just kind of depending on what sort of coverage that you want. Cost number 5, city business license. Once again, I sound like a broken record. This varies widely depending on what city you live in. So just be sure to check in with your city to see if they require a city business license and how much that's going to cost you. Expense number 6 is your website. Now, if you build your own website, these types of sites range anywhere from $15 to $35 a month, or you can pay a bit more money and have somebody else design your website for you. I have an entire blog post thoroughly breaking down all you need to know about websites, so I'll link to that in the description below. Expense number 7 is a practice management system. Once again, I went over this in great detail in the last video, but either you need to do paper filing or pay for a practice management system. So to be sure to account for this in your budget if you are going with a practice management system. For example, Simple Practices plan starts at $39 a month and goes up from there. Expense number 8, office supplies. I almost didn't even put this on here because I bought my office supplies from the dollar store and I probably spent like $10 at the Dollar Tree before I started full-time private practice, but you can splurge on this however much you wish. Here are a few more items that are optional costs in private practice, and once again, I went in much further detail in my prior video on each of these. Phone service, HIPAA-compliant email, business cards or flyers, online directories, and becoming a business entity if you wish, such as an LLC. Once again, I have an entire video about becoming an LLC. Feel free to check that out. As an example of how all of this math shakes out, here's a breakdown of how much it would cost me if I was going from 0 to full-time private practice today with all the things I have set up in my office and my practice. First, of course, there's my office, which is $840 a month, so you'd also have to add on an $840 security deposit. Then there's my furniture, which between my initial setup and the pieces that I added on is $1,300 worth of furniture. Then there's my design elements like my rug and my blanket blanket and my pillows and my wall decor and my plants and my little trinkets sitting on the table with my tissues. All of those items cost me $100 because they're mostly thrifted. Then there's liability insurance, which my personal insurance cost me $800 a year upfront. Then there's my city business license, which in the city of San Jose cost me $195 per year. Then there's my website, which cost me $25 a month to keep up. Then there's the $10 that I spent on office supplies. Then there's $5 a month that I spend on my HIPAA compliant Google for Business email. And then finally, there's the about $30 a month that I spent to be listed on the Psychology Today directory. So if you do all of that math, that's $4,145 just to get up and running in my practice if you wanted to do it exactly the way I did it in my office in the city of San Jose. So that is a pretty penny. Now let's remember in my last video when we went over the startup cost of part-time private practice in my area, we calculated it at around $800 to start part-time. So if you think about that, that's like 20% of the cost to start part-time versus full-time in my area. So you can see how it can actually be quite wise to start part-time, build up slowly, and then when it's time to switch to full-time, you have the equipment you need and it doesn't cost quite as much to make that jump to full-time. Hopefully you found this video helpful as you calculate the costs of getting started in full-time private practice. Until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well. It's so dark today. This is my lens cap. My cat just gave me side eye.